Hello, and welcome to Ray of Light, a new podcast all about writing, reading, and happiness with myself, Eleanor Ray, author of uplifting book club fiction. This episode, I'm delighted to welcome Jackie Kabler. Jackie writes fantastic psychological thrillers which have sold over 1 million copies in English alone and have been translated into 9 other languages. She's a former TV news reporter, and you may also recognise her as a presenter on the shopping channel QVC. Jackie, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. You've written 7 psychological thrillers now. Can you tell me a little bit more about your latest book, The Revenge Plot, which I read over the summer and absolutely loved? I couldn't put it down.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, The Revenge Plot came out in May, and it's really weird how the idea for this one started, because crime writers, I think we get our ideas, well, all writers, we get our ideas from many different places. And sometimes it's something sensible. Like I listen to a true crime podcast and I get an idea from that, or I read a news story. But this one was one of those really random things where I was driving to my TV job one day. And I think it was a Monday morning and I was a bit tired and I wasn't really feeling it. And I remember driving down the road and just thinking, having this random thought, imagine if I just turned the corner and the building was just not there. My workplace was just not there. What would I do then? What would happen? Which is a completely ridiculous thought, obviously. But that was kind of the idea for the book. The idea stemmed from that. So it's not any sort of weird supernatural thing or anything. It's about a woman who turns up at work on a Monday morning and her workplace has essentially vanished. The building is still there, obviously, but over the weekend it's been cleared out and she can't get in and she can't get hold of her boss. And so it all kicks off from there, basically.
I loved it. Now, it's number 7, is that right? 7
Yes,
of your
number 7.
psychological thrillers. Can you tell me a little bit more about your writing journey, how you got there? I know you had a successful career in broadcast journalism already. What made you decide what I really want to do is write a novel?
Yes, I was a TV news reporter, newspapers and then TV for 20 years. And for the last few years of that career, I suppose I wasn't really very happy. I knew that I didn't really want to do it anymore. I was traveling the world and that was great. And I covered some incredible stories. I was in Ethiopia covering famine. I covered the Asian tsunami. I was in Washington covering Bill Clinton's impeachment. I was doing all sorts of things. But I was never at home and I didn't see my family and my husband very often. And I think after 20 years, I'd kind of had enough. So the last few years of that career, I was sort of thinking, what is going to make me feel happier? And I had so much experience in covering so many major stories, particularly crime stories, actually. So I covered a lot of major crime stories. I covered the Soham murders. I covered the disappearance of Madeleine McCann and lots of high-profile crimes. And so I kind of had a lot of knowledge about how a murder case works, for example, how police procedure works and court procedure and things like that. And I thought maybe I'll just start writing some of these things down. So I started writing a book. Now, this first book was a kind of a rom-com, really. In retrospect, I don't really know why I did that because I don't really read rom-coms and it's not really my thing. But I wrote this book about a girl called Cora Baxter, who was a TV news reporter who kind of was looking for love and all of that. And I wrote it and it was terrible. It was a terrible book. And I didn't get any interest whatsoever from agents or publishers. And so I gave up and I put it away and I forgot all about it. And then a few years later, I had left my TV news job by then. And I was working freelance and I had much more time. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to get this book out again and just see what I can do with it. And then I thought, why did I write a rom-com? So I basically kept the same character, but I put a murder in. And eventually that got me a very small publishing deal with a very small publisher in Cardiff, which no longer exists, actually. And I got a 3-book deal and I wrote 3 little cozy crime novels. But they didn't set the world alight particularly. Didn't sell that many copies. They got some nice reviews, but they didn't sell that many copies. And then I decided to write something a bit darker. So I started again, essentially, and I wrote my first psychological thriller, which is called Am I Guilty? And that one got me a deal with HarperCollins. And that one did a little bit better, but it was the 5th book. So it took me 5 books to actually sort of have any sort of success. And the 5th book was a book called The Perfect Couple, which came out in 2020. And I still don't really know how it happened, but that book suddenly, within a matter of weeks, was selling and selling and selling and went to number one in the UK and number one in Canada. And then the foreign deals started to come in and it kind of became an international bestseller. And that kind of changed everything. So 5 books in, they say it takes, years and years to become an overnight success. And that definitely happened with me.
And that's wonderful to hear. And I really like how you thought, what would make me happy now? It's like, I'm not happy in my job. What can I do to kind of feel more fulfilled and have something that works better with my life and where I am now as well? I think that's such a good way of going about it. And my writing career started in a similar sort of a way. I was working in marketing in financial services. And I was trying to start a family, and it wasn't working. And I thought, what would I want to do before I start my family? And I was like, you know what I'd really love to do? I'd really love to write a novel. And so in the evenings when I got home from work, I'd just spend an hour writing a book. And like you, I started with Cozy Crime under a different name, under Elizabeth Mundy, but that's kind of a story for another day. And and I loved it, and I got a small publishing deal that got me started. Again, it was very little, but it was my dream come true. I got a published book, and I was so happy about it. And then eventually I carried on writing. I wrote 3 of those, and I successfully got pregnant and had a baby and wrote my third one of those on maternity leave. Then I had another child. It's a bit like buses. They all came along at once. And that's when I decided to write Everything is Beautiful, which is my first novel as Eleanor Ray. And I found that's when things took off a little bit for me as well, and when I was able to quit my day job and focus on writing, and it's made me really happy. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast, really, and also to just connect with the joy of actually writing, whether or not there's kind of success at the end of it. Just sitting down and writing really makes me happy. I don't know whether you feel the same.
100%, I agree. The success is wonderful, but I know that even if I had no success at all, I would still write, because it does make me happy. I'm a runner as well, which we might talk about later, but there's a quote from an American ultramarathon runner who says, "Nothing has ever broken my heart like running has, and yet I cannot breathe without it." And I really feel like that about writing as well. It can break your heart when you get the rejections and all of that we all get. But I can't breathe without it. If I'm not writing for more than a few days, everything feels wrong. And, it just brings me joy. So, yes, I agree. I think I would do it regardless of any success or any book sales. But it's nice when you do get the bit of success as well.
It is. And it's nice I find writing really rejuvenating for me. So I was unwell. I was very unwell last year. And I thought about what I really wanted. And I thought, I want to be here to look after my kids. That's the most important thing. If I get another book finished, great. If I don't, then, we don't know what life's going to throw at us. But I discovered that looking after my kids was very draining. It was tiring. It's physically exhausting. They're all very little. Whereas writing, it was rejuvenating. It made me feel better, and just something that you can sit down and do without having to do anything too active with it. I really liked it, but that must be a really good foil to the ultra marathon running.
Yeah, it is. I mean, weirdly, the two kind of connect, which people do find surprising, and I find surprising actually. But yes, I run ultra marathons, and if people don't know it, an ultra marathon is defined as anything longer than a marathon, so anything longer than 26.2 miles. So my last 2 races, for example, have been a 60-mile and a 40-mile run. And I just really enjoy the long distances because I like the challenge, and it's about running long and slow and having endurance rather than, running fast, which is great. But I find I do so much plotting during those long runs as well, because when you're running for I've run for up to 24 hours non-stop. So I've done that 3 times. So when you're running for 24 hours, there are races which run from midday Saturday to midday Sunday. So you're running all through the night. And you have a lot of time on your own to think. And I find I work out so many plot points and have ideas for books and everything while I'm running. So I although sometimes I feel guilty about devoting so many hours to running when I should be doing other things, I do feel it kind of helps me write as well, which is really interesting. And I didn't really expect that. So yeah, it's all part of the grand scheme of life. Running has to be part of my writing now. That's my excuse. So.
I'm not a runner at all, but I've just started trying to get more into it and trying to, for my health and things, cardiovascular. And I've never even dreamed of doing a marathon, but the idea of an ultra marathon, like it seems better to me. It seems like where there's kind of the value in running because it sounds cooler than a marathon. But in my head, having only ever run 5K, it's easier because you do it in beautiful places with lovely scenery. You stop for lunch. You're not kind of looking at your time because
Yes.
it's too far. You have to have breaks. You have to walk. You don't feel like a failure if you slow down a bit. Is that true, or am I kidding myself?
Yes. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, certainly most ultra marathons are off road. There's hardly any that are beyond road. So they're all in beautiful places. And it's more about conquering the terrain and the distance. So if you're running 5K, a lot of people want to get a good time. If you're running 100K or longer, then it's all about just getting to that finish line and enjoying the journey, basically. And you can't really compare times. People say, oh, what would be your marathon time? It's impossible to say because the races that I do, sometimes you're literally up to your knees in water. You're running up and down hills. You're climbing over stiles and walls. You're sliding around in mud. So you cannot compare it to running on a road, on concrete, with no traffic, closed off roads that you'd get in a road marathon. So it's a different sport. It really is a different sport, and it is fine to walk. Everyone walks the hills, up the hills and runs down them and so on. And there's lots of cake and tea, and it's just wonderful. It's a great sport.
It does sound brilliant. It maybe not
Yeah.
up to your knees in water and mud, but apart from
Yeah.
that, it sounds fantastic. And one thing you said there that really resonated me with is enjoying the journey. And I think that's true for writing and for running and for life. It's like it's not just about the destination. You get a publishing deal and that feels amazing, but you have to enjoy every day of writing that gets you
Yes.
to that point. And that's one of the reasons for this podcast, really. It's like, let's really enjoy the process of what we're doing. So talking about that, what bit of writing do you love the most? What's your favorite element of writing a novel?
It's the readers. That is 100% what it is. It's connecting with the readers. And I think we're very lucky now as writers to live in the age of social media, because when I was a child, the only way you would be able to get contact with your favorite author would be to write a letter, and most of the time you would probably never hear back from them. But now people can contact us instantly on Instagram or X or whatever it is, and we can reply. And I get messages, I would say, every single day from people who are reading one of my books and who want to say how much they enjoyed it or, ask me something about it. And that is the greatest joy. I love it. I love it so much. I actually have a little file that I keep on my computer with, I call it nice messages, because, sometimes there are days when you doubt yourself. And I think a lot of us have imposter syndrome and we think, oh, I'm not really good enough. And I'm not, this book is terrible. I always reach a point when I'm writing a book that I think it's the worst book anyone's ever written. And it's going to be an absolute turkey. Nobody's going to read it. Every time. I wonder what that will never go away. It's ridiculous, I think. So I have this file. When I have those moments of self-doubt, I have this file that I call nice messages. And I just read through some of the messages from readers, and it just brings me right back up again because people are so lovely. And I love that immediacy that they can just get hold of us now and tell us that they've enjoyed our books, which is just wonderful. So I think the readers are the best bit, actually.
That's so refreshing, because I hear a lot of writers complaining about having to do social media, and it's not like lots of people want to write a book because they want to just shut themselves away in a room and write. And I do love that bit of it, but it is lovely. Like getting a message from someone saying that what you've written has really touched them is lovely. I got a lot of that with Everything is Beautiful, which is a novel about a hoarder. And a lot of people wrote to me and said, oh, I collect all these things that I find really precious, like Amy, your main character. And that's just been wonderful. It's so nice to hear people say lovely things about the book.
It is wonderful. And when people say that, I've had a few from people who said that they hadn't read a book in years. In fact, I had the most wonderful, wonderful message from a young guy who I think probably was about 19 or 20. And he messaged me and said he'd never read a book since he was at school, when he had to read books. And he'd been on holiday, and I think he was with his family, and he was a bit bored. And he'd found a book in the hotel, and it was one of my books that somebody had left. And he read it, and he contacted me and said he couldn't put it down. And he says, I think I'm a reader now. And I thought, oh my goodness. And he's contacted me again. That was last year. He contacted me again this year and said that he'd been on holiday again, and he'd read one of my books again on holiday this year. But deliberately this time he brought it with him. And he's a reader now. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is a young guy who hadn't really read, and it wasn't a thing for him. And now it is. And that was just so wonderful. Made my day.
Amazing. That is wonderful. Now
Yeah.
back to your books.
Hmm.
Your books feature people, I would say, doing pretty mean things to each other. The revenge plot, it doesn't have murder in it, and it's not gory in any way. That might speak back to your kind of your cozy crime heritage. It's much more in the
Mm.
psychological realm. But I think what you did really well was show the guilt and regret that people feel evil as they're doing these awful things.
Mm.
What made you choose to kind of dwell a little bit on that side of things?
This book was a bit of a risk actually, because most of my books do have some nice characters in them, some characters that have some redeeming qualities. This book, all it's basically about three women, and everyone's kind of taking revenge on everyone else. So it's a bit of a complicated plot, but it's about three women, and actually none of them are particularly likable at all. And my editor, when I was writing it, said, you're going to have to try and make them, at least one of them, a bit likable. And I tried, but I still don't think that any of them are very likable. And actually, that is risky because readers tend not to really like a book if they can't identify with at least one character. I didn't really intend to make them all so unlikable and so vicious. But what I did try to do was to, as you said, feed in a little bit of humanity into them all and make them feel a little bit guilty about what they're doing. Because I think you would. I mean, I've never done anything as terrible as these women are doing in this book, but I feel that everybody must at some point think, oh gosh, have I gone too far now? Is this a little bit much? And that's what they do in the book. They do terrible things and I think, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe I should back off a bit. Maybe she's suffered enough. So I tried to make them real, even if they're not very nice. Which was a bit tricky because they are pretty awful. But but it seems to have worked. So, the reviews, there haven't been that many terrible reviews. So hopefully I've pulled it off just about.
I know, I think you definitely have. And I think you had that they are very real and very believable, even though they're doing,
Mm.
in some instances, quite extreme things. But because they
Mm.
have that moment, those moments of actually, oh, what am I doing? Oh, have I gone too far? Should I be doing this? Am I a dreadful person? It really brings
Yeah.
them to life, I think, much more. And
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. Um,
Thank you.
so the revenge plot is a bit different to some of your other books, you said. Which is your favorite of your own books and why do you love it?
Very tricky. I'm sitting here looking at them. I kind of like them all for different reasons. I guess I should really like The Perfect Couple the most because that's the one that kind of changed everything for me. Um, I've got a fondness for Am I Guilty, which was my first psychological thriller, because that kind of changed things in a different way. It got me my deal with HarperCollins and it got me into a new genre. And actually it's one that a lot of the book bloggers say is their favorite as well. It's about a mystery surrounding a dead child. So I've got a fondness for that one, I think. But I also really like a book that came out 2, 3 years ago, The Vanishing of Class 3B. I can't remember when it came out. That's terrible, isn't it? The Vanishing of Class 3B, which is about a whole class of children who go on a school day trip and just don't come back. And that was a really fun book to write. And I think I enjoyed writing that one the most. So I think it's hard to pick. It's like asking you, well, who's your favorite child? I don't know if I can pick really which is my favorite, to be honest.
It's, the one I'm writing at the moment tends to be my favorite, where kind of
Does
there's
it?
infinite possibilities. Um, and then it's published and it's you're happy with it, but there's not infinite possibilities. It couldn't be anything anymore because it's a thing and it's real. So I always like the one that I'm working
Yeah.
on. You've mentioned your readers bringing you the most joy. What do you find the
Hmm.
hardest part of writing a novel, and how do you get through it?
I live in fear actually of running out of ideas. It hasn't happened yet. I live in fear of running out of ideas for the next book. So once I have an idea for a book and I'm in the book, I don't tend to really have many issues because the idea is there, it's in my head, it's all coming together. But I worry constantly about the next book and whether I can come up with a decent idea. My books are kind of known to be quite hooky and how I can really sum them up in one sentence. Sometimes I get ideas, but they're a bit woolly, and I think, oh, no, that's not good enough. And so that's kind of my fear. And so I'm already worrying about. I don't have a fully formed idea for the next book yet. I've got a couple of half-baked ideas, And I'm already I'm trying not to worry about it yet because I don't have to think about that till December. But it's at the edge of my mind nibbling away. And I'm just thinking, oh no, 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 I don't have an idea. I don't have an idea properly yet. It'll come. I know it will come. But that's what
Always
worries me the
does.
most. Yeah, it does,
Yes.
doesn't it? Do you do that as well? Because your ideas are always very, very different. And I mean, you write totally different books to me, but your ideas are all very, pithy and different. Your characters are amazing. So I can't imagine you having much difficulty, but maybe you do.
No, thank you. I tend to have more ideas than I can write, actually.
Oh,
It's whether
how
they're
annoying.
sorry. It's whether they're any good. Normally I'll write a page of ideas and I'll send it to my agent, say, what do you think of these? And he'll normally say, like, 5 of them are rubbish, but this one's interesting. Maybe if you mix it a bit with that one. Like, oh. but yeah, I tend to have lots of ideas, and my ideas generally they all come from my oldest child, my son, who's 8 now. Everything
Oh.
is Beautiful started when I was pregnant with my daughter, my second child, and he suddenly started collecting things. He'd go to the park and he'd pick these kind of bottle tops and wilting daisies and bits of various stones and things that weren't terribly clean. He was only a toddler. And he'd like, no, no, these are mine. These are mine. You can't throw them away. Like, oh. And I think it's because he could see things were changing, like my belly was growing, things were like shifting a bit. And I think he was holding on to things because as something he could control, because there was so much that he couldn't and he didn't understand, whereas he understood rocks. And I thought, it's not a children's book that I wrote, Everything is Beautiful. I thought, what if
Mm.
a grown-up had that same kind of feeling? And what if it was because something had happened to her in the past and she didn't have any closure, and then she collects loads and loads of things because the people she really wants to be with have disappeared. So
Mm.
that was where that idea came from. And then The Art of Belonging was again inspired by my son. He was very into miniature trains. And I thought, again, you get this kind of sense of control when you have a little miniature train set. And I wanted to write about that kind of controlling something small when you can't control the big things. And then See the Stars, he went through a big planetary phase where he got really interested in all the planets, all the stars, how they all worked. We went to planetariums together. It kind of reminded me of that feeling when you're young and you look up at the sky and you think about the stars, and it makes you feel so small. And I wanted to capture that,
Mm.
especially after I'd written about very small things for a while, very close up, and I wanted to get that kind of sense of distance into my
I
books
loved
again.
that book. I love that book,
Oh,
See the
thank
Stars.
you.
It was wonderful. And you sounded like a real astronomy expert. I thought, is she actually a secret astronomer? It was really good. I learnt a lot, actually. It was really, really a good book.
Thank you.
Everyone
No,
should
it
read
was
that.
all research I did with my 7-year-old son.
Oh, I love that.
He's the expert now. He's the expert. So getting away from our books, what's another book that you've read that you absolutely love? Maybe something that isn't a bestseller, something that our listeners, sorry, might not be familiar with.
Well, now, I'm going to tell you about my favorite book of all time, and it will not be what you expect. It's not a wonderful literary sensation or anything like that. It is a true story, and I've got it here for the benefit of anyone who's looking at video. I'm going to wave it at you, but it's by the comedian Tony Hawks, and it came out in 1998, so it's nearly 27 years ago, and it's called Round Ireland with a Fridge. And this is a true story of how Tony Hawks took on a drunken bet after a night in the pub that he couldn't hitchhike around the circumference of Ireland within one calendar month with a fridge. So we had to hitchhike with a fridge. It is, I promise you, the funniest book you will ever read. I read this regularly every few years, and I still laugh out loud every single time. In fact, I read it only just recently again because I haven't read it for about 5 or 6 years. Now at the time, it was actually a Sunday Times bestseller, and they made a film of it in 2010, I think. Haven't seen the film, but it was made into a film, and it is still available, even though it came out nearly 27 years ago. And honestly, if you need cheering up, this book is hysterically funny. The fridge goes surfing, the fridge gets baptized. I mean, it's laugh out loud funny. I remember when I first read it in the 1990s, and I was traveling by train a lot, and I had to stop reading it on the train because I was laughing so much that people were just staring at me. So that is my favorite book, and I tell everybody about this book. And it's no literary genius creation, but it's just the funniest book in the whole world. And I think it will always be my favorite book. So Tony Hawk's Round Ireland with a Fridge is my favorite book.
Oh, I'm going to get a copy of that. That sounds absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic. I love books that make me laugh. I love books when
Yeah.
books make me cry, but I love it even more when they make me laugh. Preferably if they can do both, that's even better. But I won't ask you if
Exactly.
anything terrible happens to the fridge.
No, it actually, do you know what? It's a really uplifting, but it's a bit like what you write. It is very uplifting, and it has some really meaningful scenes in it and so on. It's not just about the comedy of him trying to hitchhike with a fridge. There's a lot of life lessons in it as well, which is why I think I like it. And I checked this morning just to make sure that it is still available, and it is still available on Amazon in all formats, and it has some quite recent reviews. So 27 years later, people are still reading it and still laughing at it. So that's a good sign, I think.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Now, if we've got anyone listening who thinks, oh, I would like to write a novel, that sounds great. It's something that would bring me happiness. Do you have any tips? Any tips for aspiring
Mm.
authors? Maybe any wisdom that you were given early on or something that you've learned along the way that you'd like to share?
Well, I think really the most important thing is reading. And that sounds kind of obvious, but I know lots of people who say that they want to write a book, and I go, well, are you a big reader? And they go, no, not really. And I think that's so strange, because I don't think you can be a good writer if you don't read extensively. And ideally read extensively within the genre that you want to write in, but also try and, read outside that as well. I mean, I'm very guilty of mostly reading crime novels, but I do read outside my genre as well. And I think it's really important to read a lot, not to copy other writers, but just to get the feel of how a book is constructed. And especially, for example, if you want to be a crime writer, just to see how the great crime writers construct their plots and how they put in their little red herrings and their clues, and how they do the twists and all of that. I think it's so important. And there's other advice out there which I don't think is as helpful. Like, a lot of people say you should write every day. Well, people say you should write every day. I don't write every day. And I think to say that you have to write every day, it puts a massive amount of pressure on you, especially if you've got a busy life. So I don't think you have to do that. But I think when you do sit down to write, if it is a few times a week, you have to focus, you have to get rid of all the distractions, whether that means, when I was writing and I was still a news reporter, I'd be writing on planes and trains and in my hotel rooms, and, just using that time. So I don't think you have to write every day, but I think you have to block off time to make yourself write. And also, people say, write what you know. Now, if I just wrote what I know, I would never be writing about murders and things like that, would I? So I think, write what you know, but also don't forget you can do a lot of research. There's plenty of resources out there, especially in the age of the internet. So you don't necessarily have to write what you know, because I've had people say to me, but I've led a very quiet life and I don't have much experience and I don't know what I would write about. Just get online and do some research. There's plenty of research out there that you can do. And I think we underestimate how much knowledge we have, especially as you get older. Most of us have suffered bereavement, and we've suffered relationship breakups, and all of these things can feed into your writing. So just think back over your life and think, well, actually, yes, that was a tough time, but I got through it and this happened to me. And I think you can incorporate all that into your writing. So I think there's some bad advice out there, but I think read a lot and make sure you've got time to write. And actually, people say, oh, I don't have time to write. When I retire, I'll write. You do have time to write. Just stop watching television or get up earlier. You can make the time to write. I watch very little television. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning sometimes to fit everything in. If you really want to do it, you will find a way to do it. And if you don't really want to do it, you'll find an excuse. And that's kind of how I think about it. So that's tough love. But if you want to do it, just do it and stop making excuses. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think you can carve out little chunks of time. So I started writing when I had a full-time job, and then I wrote, I've written 3 books while I've been at home with baby. And it's just like, instead of switching on the telly when the baby's having a nap, you get out your laptop and do a bit of writing, and you can do little segments that add up. And my advice is always, don't wait until you feel inspired. It doesn't have to be every day, but just get down and write. And the inspiration, there's something about kind of the action of typing or handwriting or something that will bring the inspiration. When you have to fill a page, you will. So you don't feel you need to wait until you have that brilliant idea. Just get started and just see what comes out.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
So I think we've spoken a little bit about the ultra marathons. Where else do
Mm.
you find happiness in life?
The only other thing I always say, I only really do four things. I work on my TV job, I write, I run, and I garden. My garden is my absolute joy. We moved into our house about 6 years ago, and the garden was nothing. It was a big square of grass with not a single plant, flower, anything. And we've spent 6 years basically bringing it to life. And now it's full of color and fruit and vegetables and flowers and shrubs. And it brings me so much joy just to get out there, get my hands dirty, the joy of seeing things grow. I love it so much. And I think, again, it's a good antidote to kind of the rest of my life. A lot of the time I'm either in a TV studio, which has no windows, or I'm sitting at my writing desk indoors. And so running and gardening are the two things that get me outside. And gardening, I just think it's so good for you. It's good, so good for your mental health. It's just good for your soul, to nurture things. Maybe again, it's part of me not having children. I still want to nurture something. So to plant things from seed and see them grow, and to go and pick your own dinner from your greenhouse is just wonderful. So gardening is my other big love as well.
Wonderful. And I think it's really important to do things that are physically quite different. So I found when I was working full time in an office at a computer screen, and then I'd come home and open my computer screen and write, it got a bit samey. It's just like, oh, I'm sitting in the same position. I've got the same kind of aches and niggles. So I can't write, even to this day. I have to be lying down to write. I have to be reclined on a sofa.
Lying down?
Yes.
Do you?
Well, kind of
Oh,
semi-reclined.
Goodness. Right.
Semi-reclined, lying back on a sofa, legs up, cushion, laptop, like that. Otherwise, it feels too much like I'm in my day job. It feels too much like working at a desk. So I always write like that. And yeah, I think it's very important. Do hobbies that have physically a little bit of difference to them, so you don't end up kind of doing the same thing all the
so
time. And gardening sounds
interesting.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that. I suppose that's true because actually in my TV job I stand up all the time. So my
Okay.
writing I sit down. So that, people have said, "Oh, would you not get a standing desk?" I'm like, "No, I stand up enough." I run so many miles a week and I stand up at work. So no, I want to sit down.
Brilliant. So what do you have coming up next? I think you said you're already writing your next novel.
Yes.
Give us a sneak peek.
I can actually, because it's already on Amazon, although there's no cover yet, but it is already on Amazon. And actually, this is something that the book is called Run for Your Life. And there may be a clue in the title that it might be set in the world of running. And actually, this is something I have resisted for quite a long time. I did have an idea about a book, a thriller set in the world of running. And I had the idea a few years ago. But I didn't really tell my editor because I didn't actually want to write it. And then we were going through ideas one day and I did mention it. She said, "Oh yeah, well, I really want you to write that. I really want you to write that." And I said, "I actually don't really want to write it because there is murder in this book. And tragically, people, especially women actually around the world, do get murdered all too often while they're out running. And there's a lot of issues around particularly women's safety while running alone. And I've had my own experiences of being hassled while out running, which is one of the reasons I actually run off-road now rather than on-road, because I find it safer to run across fields and through woods rather than running on roads with people and traffic. And so I resisted writing this book for quite a long time because it does involve murder and runners. But finally, my editor persuaded me to give it a go. And I think I have come up with a plot which I'm happy with. And yeah, so I'm writing a book about a serial killer, and it's set in the world of running. And my deadline is the 1st of December, and it's coming out in May next year, and it's called Run for Your Life. Yeah. So we don't have a cover or anything yet, but it is available to pre-order on Amazon already, which I always find really weird because it's only sort of 3/4 written and people are ordering it already. So that's really lovely, but a bit scary.
You've got that many novels under your belt, I think. Hopefully we can trust you to finish this one off.
Yeah, I'll definitely finish it. I promise it'll be coming out. Yeah.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you so much, Jackie. And thank you to all our listeners. So Jackie's most recent novel, The Revenge Plot, is out now. So if you've enjoyed Ray of Light, please do like and subscribe for more. You can find me at Eleanor Ray Books across Instagram, TikTok and Facebook. So please do reach out to me there to let me know your thoughts. As you've heard from Jackie, we love to hear from readers and listeners. If you have ideas for the kinds of questions you'd like me to ask, or even ideas for people you'd like me to interview, please do let me know. And if you've liked what you heard, you might like what I write too. We've discussed it a bit today. It's uplifting book club fiction. And my newest book is called See the Stars, about a woman who finds solace in the stars when her life doesn't go to plan. So see you next time for more tips on writing, reading, and happiness.